right. So I am recording, and we have participants ready to go, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just got a delivery of my glasses. Awesome, because that's probably going to come in handy. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Joshua Eyer, and I am happy to welcome you all today to the fourth installment of the Let's Talk series, which is aimed at helping all of us to cope with this pandemic in better ways and to, get better things out of our life than we might if we just sat at home miserable. So today's topic is meditation as a coping tool, and I have with me, this is me, Rob Alley, who is a jazz trumpeter and an instructor in the Honors College. One of his mantras, at least on his website, is art is not a genre, it is an attitude toward activity, which I thought was cool given what we're talking about today. He's an instructor in the Honors College where he teaches arts-based courses that include art for life's sake, leadership lessons from jazz, and improvisation in life through music. They provide influential life lessons such as how improvisation can teach you resilience. And Rob is a friend of mine, and I've talked to him about these courses many times. They are so cool. And if you start talking about having met Rob and what he does, then inevitably one of your undergraduate students will say, "Are you talking about Rob Alley?" That happened to me last week, Rob. It happens to me all the time.
Nice.
He's wonderful. He's also an award-winning professional career. He has an award-winning professional career in performing, arranging, and recording. He has his master's in arranging, specifically jazz, and his bachelor's in music. And you can see that awesome picture of him performing trumpet. But I wouldn't tell you all about what a great performer he is without also showing you what a great performer he is. This was a recording I made of him at the Alcove when he was playing Jazz Night, and it is appropriately entitled Respiration by Ben Allison. I'll just play a minute of it. All right. I did not tell Rob I was going to do that.
Is that me?
That was you, man. That was awesome. It's one of my favorite moments of all the jazz.
A lot of
What was that?
I was just gonna say there's a lot of head nodding going on there. A lot of saying yes, as we say in improvisation.
Awesome. So we are going to talk today a little bit about the science of meditation, some benefits of meditation. What is meditation? And I've got a few notes. Then we're going to let Rob talk for a while about meditation, and he's got some activities that he's going to lead us through and some advice. And this is really meant to be a time for us to sort of talk about meditation and then talk about it more as a group. So there'll be a lot of interaction in the last part of it. If y'all hear any background noise, they're working on the road outside of my house, which is how this stuff goes now, right? With Zoom. Okay, so this is a brief sort of overview of the science meditation that Rob sent me by Dan Harris, and you may remember that name. He's the author of the Face COVID brochure that Bama shared with you and that we talked about in the first one of these Let's Talks.
There's no way a fidgety and skeptical news anchor would ever have started meditating were it not for the science. The science is really compelling. It shows that meditation can boost your immune system, lower your blood pressure, help you deal with problems ranging from irritable bowel syndrome to psoriasis. And the neuroscience is where it really gets sci-fi. There was a study out of Harvard that shows that short, daily doses of meditation can literally grow the gray matter in key areas of your brain having to do with self-awareness and compassion, and shrink the gray matter in the area associated with stress. There's also a study out of Yale that looked at what's called the default mode network of the brain. It's a connected series of brain regions that are active during most of our waking hours when we're doing that thing that human beings do all the time, which is obsessing about ourselves, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, doing anything but being focused on what's happening right now. Meditators not only turn off the default mode network of their brain while they're meditating, but even when they're not meditating. In other words, meditators are setting a new default mode. And what's that default mode? They're focused on what's happening right now. In sports, this is called being in the zone. It's nothing mystical. It's not magical. You're not floating off into cosmic ooze. You are just being where you are. The cliche in self-help circles is being in the now. You can use that term if you want, but because it's accurate, it's slightly annoying, but it's accurate. It's more just being focused on what you're doing. And the benefits of that are enormous. And this is why you're seeing these unlikely meditators now, why you're seeing U.S. Marines adopting it, the U.S. Army, corporate executives from the head of Ford to the founders of Twitter, athletes from Phil Jackson to many, many Olympians, scientists, doctors, lawyers, school children. There's this sort of elite subculture of high achievers who are adopting this because they know it can help you be more focused on what you're doing, and it can stop you from being yanked around by the voice in your head. My powers of prognostication are not great. I bought a lot of stock in the company that made Palm Pilot back in 2000, and that didn't go so well for me. But having said that, I'm going to make a prediction. I think we're looking at meditation as the next big public health revolution. In the 1940s, if you told people that you went running, they would say, who's chasing you? Right now, if you tell people you meditate, and I have a lot of experience with telling people this, they're going to look at you like you're a little weird most of the time. That's going to change. Meditation is going to join the pantheon of no-brainers like exercise, brushing your teeth, and taking the meds that your doctor prescribes to you. These are all things that if you don't do, you feel guilty about. And that is where I think we're heading with meditation, because the science is so strongly suggestive that meditation can do really, really great things for your brain and for your body. The common assumption that we have, and maybe subconscious, is that our happiness really depends on external factors. How was our childhood? Have we won the lottery recently? Did we marry well? Did we marry at all? But in fact, meditation suggests that happiness is actually a skill, something you can train just the way you can train your body in the gym. It's a self-generated thing. And that's a really radical notion. It doesn't mean that external circumstances aren't going to impact your happiness. It doesn't mean you're not going to be subject to the vagaries of an impermanent, entropic universe. This means you are going to be able to navigate this with a little bit more ease.
All right.
There's no way.
Whoop. Don't need to hear it again, though. That's a really good overview, and I really like how the speaker there really sort of like makes some translation stuff between what we sort of hear about with meditation and the gurus and the, retreats in California and stuff versus what it can be for us in our day-to-day lives. And that really is the value of meditation and what we want to do here. And I've got another video I'll play y'all in a second. It's actually an excerpt from the book that's really good about this. It's done the research about meditation. But basically, meditation can be a whole lot of things. It can go all the way from a short-term thing that we do just to manage stress in the moment to a lifestyle that can produce really important changes to us. And so I wanted to spend a minute talking about the benefits of meditation. And I found this nice website that lists them. First off, meditation almost certainly does sharpen your attention. That's the first of the 10 things we know. It's really good for helping you focus attention. It also, if you do it in a long-term way, very consistently, meditation does seem to increase your resiliency to stress. And that's related to that skill of emotion regulation, which is another big payoff of long-term meditation. Meditation does appear to increase your compassion, and it also makes our compassion more effective. And That's valuable because one of the things we do when we get better at showing compassion is we get better at showing compassion to ourselves, so less self-loathing. And when we are able to show compassion to others, we actually end up having better relationships as well. Meditation does seem to improve our mental health, but it's not necessarily more effective than other steps you can take. Exercise is still really powerful. Therapy helps. There are lots of things you can do. Mindfulness could also have a positive impact on the relationships, and we just talked about one way that it could do that. Mindfulness seems to reduce many kinds of bias. So bias is related to stereotypes, and they're basically cognitive shortcuts, ways that we act on things without really thinking about that information. And mindfulness can help us to be more aware of when we're doing that, when we're taking those shortcuts. Meditation also does have an impact on physical health, but it's modest. Most of the benefits we see from meditation are more for our mental states and our social and emotional health. Also, meditation might not be good for everyone all the time. And I know that's one of the things that Rob talks about, and he'll probably mention to us later. But just because meditation is generally positive doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing for you right now. And that's okay. Number 9, what kind of meditation is right for you? That depends. There are several types I'm going to talk about, and one might work for you better than another. And then number 10, how much meditation is enough? That also depends. What's right for you right now may be different. And Rob's probably going to talk about that in a second as well. He's got a great story that I've prompted him to tell you about with his daughter. So mindfulness can start from a very small amount to a larger amount. Okay, so what is meditation? There are a lot of different counts. When I Googled what is meditation, so I could have a list of these to show you, it went from 6 up to 23. So I picked 6. Mindfulness meditation is the one that we'll be focusing a lot on today. And that is the development of a skill that allows you to pay attention in the moment to what's happening with your body and with your mind. And as it passes and as thoughts come in and you notice them, you return yourself to the present awareness of the moment. Spiritual meditation is something that we do all over the world in lots of different ways. Prayer is one of the really powerful ways. Some people will reflect on God and on their spirituality and on their interconnectedness with other people who share their beliefs. Focused meditation is another type, and that is focusing on your sensory experience. So it's a real concentration. It's often used in transition with other meditations to help you to block out distractions and bring yourself into the moment. Things like when people say, feel the weight of your feet against the floor, or feel the seat as it supports you. Those are prompts given to you to help you to focus on what you're actually feeling in that moment. Other times it'll be what you're smelling or what you're hearing. Movement meditation is one that we'll do later too. Rob has an activity for that. But we know about yoga at the end of yoga after we've gone through this concentration where we've focused on different poses. We'll get to the end and we'll also have a reflective moment. So that movement meditation can put your brain into a good meditative state. Tai Chi is also the same thing, or has a similar effect on you. Mantra meditation is where you focus on a word or phrase over and over again as it brings you into a reflective awareness about that word or phrase. And then loving kindness meditation, we mentioned a minute ago, helps you to develop compassion for yourself and for the world. And it has been linked with feeling more positive emotions in your life in general. The more that you can develop the skill of compassion, the more it seems to help you develop an ability to maintain a positive affect as you go through your day. Okay, so this is from a great book that was published last year, I think. by Daniel Goleman and Richard Davison. And it's called Altered Traits, and it surveys 30 plus years of research on mindfulness, a lot of it done by Richard Davidson, who's a major neuroscientist. All right, so I'm going to play this briefly and then we'll move forward. Oh, well, to set it up a bit, what I like about this specific passage is that they survey different levels of meditation and how you can work it into different parts of your life and the way it's sort of used in people's lives. And it's valuable. They end with this, but I'll start with it because whatever level you want to start with and whatever level you want to work it into your life is good and beneficial. And so be thinking about that. Like, you don't have to desire to go on a 2-week retreat or meditate every day for an hour to get benefits of meditation. There are lots of little ways that you can get benefits as well.
The pragmatic applications of meditation, like the mindfulness that helps Steve recover from trauma, appeal widely but do not go so deep. Because this wide approach has easy access, multitudes have found a way to include at least a bit of meditation into their day. There are then two paths, the deep and the wide. Those two paths are often confused with each other, though they differ greatly. We see the deep path embodied at two levels. In a pure form, for example, in the ancient lineages of Theravada Buddhism as practiced in Southeast Asia, or among Tibetan yogis, for whom we'll see some remarkable data in Chapter 11, A Yogi's Brain. We'll call this most intensive type of practice Level 1. At Level 2, these traditions have been removed from being part of a total lifestyle, monk or yogi, for example, and adapted into forms more palatable for the West. At Level 2, meditation comes in forms that leave behind parts of the original Asian source that might not make the cross-cultural journey so easily. Then there are the wide approaches. At Level 3, a further remove takes these same meditation practices out of their spiritual context and distributes them ever more widely, as is the case with mindfulness-based stress reduction, better known as MBSR, founded by our good friend John Kabat-Zinn and taught now in thousands of clinics and medical centers and far beyond. Or Transcendental Meditation, TM, which offers classic Sanskrit mantras to the modern world in a user-friendly format. The even more widely accessible forms of meditation at Level 4 are, of necessity, the most watered down, all the better to render them handy for the largest number of people. The current vogues of mindfulness at your desk or via minutes-long meditation apps exemplify this level. We foresee also a Level 5, one that exists now only in bits and pieces, but which may well increase in number and reach with time. At Level 5, the lessons scientists have learned in studying all the other levels will lead to innovations and adaptations that can be of widest benefit.
Okay, so you see that mindfulness is already integrating all over our lives. Okay, so there are a few notes I want to start with before we bring Rob into the conversation. First, I want to emphasize that meditation is a whole mind-body activity. We'll tend to think a lot about our minds, but it actually brings the whole body into, ooh, we just lost Rob. He comes back. I do know the story of Vivi, I can tell you. So it's a whole mind-body activity. The focus is on training our brain to understand and perceive the world in specific ways, but in order to do that, we bring our body along, and as a result, it creates a more holistic, cohesive experience of ourselves as well. Another really important concept is that you, as a person, are much greater than your thoughts and your feelings. And our thoughts and feelings are actually like droplets that run across the outside of us. So just like a raindrop on a window pane. And as a result, we can view our thoughts and feelings. We can see them as they're happening. We don't have to be locked in with them as if they are us. They are not. we are something separate and greater than that. And we can see our thoughts and feelings as they're happening. And in that process of seeing them, we develop a distance that allows us not to be forced around by our thoughts and feelings, but rather be able to influence our thoughts and feelings. Another thing that I think is incredibly important is that your way is the right way. My phrase for this is respect your process. You know what's going to work for you. You know what's going to fit into your life. Use that. Make it fit into your life the way you want it to. Use what sounds good to you. Let that be what you do. You don't have to feel forced to do anything you don't want to. Doing it your way is the way that's going to work for you. And then the last thing about meditation that I'll add is that it develops a lot more intentionality to how we act. And we talked about that with stereotypes. But one of the great things about a meditation practice that you get is you develop much more of an ability to be intentional about what you want in your life, how you seek out what you like, what you want in your life, what decisions you make about what your life looks like. I'm sure Rob's going to talk more about that. So that is the end of my prologue stuff. And now we'll get to Rob talking about us. And Rob told me the story of how he started his daughter meditating. And I think it's a really great story and where I'd like Rob to start with us. Because just like with sleep, and we're going to talk in a little while about upcoming webinars, and including one about sleep, I think that learning to meditate is more about coaxing yourself into doing something that is new and might be challenging. And the more challenging it is, sort of the better it is for you. One of the funny things that I heard about how much you're supposed to be meditating is if you should be trying to meditate at least 20 minutes a day unless you're way too busy, and then it should be an hour. So it's like, how do you coax yourself into doing this thing that's good for you, that you need, that might be especially hard for you? And so Rob's story about how he, brought his daughter into being able to meditate, I think is a beautiful way for us to think about how we can bring ourselves into it. How if we treat ourselves with the sweet, loving, caring way that we would treat a child, we can actually help coax ourselves into it. Right before we do that, I'll add that Holly shared a link to Dan Harris's 10% Happier app. And if you will, if we get that actually right now, we'll get 6 months free, if I'm looking at that right, which is a great app. And that was the level 5 sort of interventions that they were talking about in the video. So check that out, and we'll remind you of that again at the end, so you can click on that link and go there. Okay, Rob, do you want to go ahead and get started and tell us about Evie's story?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, really, and I hope this is helpful to everyone. Yeah, I think that I'm not exactly sure how far to go back to with the story, but we're not a religious family. We're very spiritual. So my daughter's being raised in a spiritual household without any formal religion, although I'm very religion curious. I'm not at all antagonistic toward any sort of religion. So, she's been allowed to develop her own sense of religiosity or lack thereof. And she was probably I'm not exactly sure the timeline, but she was in 3rd or 4th grade, I believe. And, that's around the time when kids start talking about what church they go to at school and what they identify as. And because I identify more than anything, although I'm not religious, with Eastern religions, Taoism and Buddhism in particular. There's a lot of that around the house, and we talk about it a lot, and there's a lot of books, and I read a lot and study a lot. And so I think at some point she just decided she would self-identify as Buddhist. And so she came home and said that she, had been talking to her friends and that she was Buddhist. And so that gave me a kind of an entryway into discussing meditation practice with her. And I said, well, that's cool. I mean, I'm glad to know that. And of course that led to me saying, I'm not Buddhist, but you're certainly welcome to be Buddhist, and we support you in that. And we're happy to help you get to any sort of resources or community you would like to be engaged with. And she said, okay. And I said, let's try some meditation. And so she didn't know what that was. And so I explained to her very briefly. And what we wound up doing was buying her some simple books that are geared towards children. One of them is, I don't remember the exact title, but it's Thich Nhat Hanh's book about meditation for children, having to do with counting pebbles and watching the trees and just general typical awareness exercises. And so we worked with her on that a little bit. And then once she got to where she was comfortable with that, and she was a little more curious, she asked if we could do something else. And I said, yes, let's do. And so I started waking her up 1 minute early every single day. And we would sit on the floor. And at that point, for 1 minute, you don't need a cushion or any special implementation. We would just sit on the floor for 1 minute. And I set a timer, which I will do later today. It involved bells, and she likes that. She's a very audio oriented person. And so we did that for probably a couple months. And then I said, do you want to extend it a little bit? And she said, yes. And so we did 90 seconds, and we did that for a little while. And then our lives changed, and she no longer meditates. I asked her several times. She was probably 9 at that point, maybe 10, and now she's 13. She just turned 13 yesterday. So it's my belief, and hopefully this proves that in my own life, that it's a bad idea to force anybody to do anything. And at some point when she kind of grumbled about getting up early in the morning, I just let it go. And I said, great, anytime you want to do that, I'm happy to help you with that. And so she does not anymore, although I offer every once in a while. And the advice that I've heard from experts outside, just in my own studies, is that the best thing to do is, of course, model good behavior. And I have a dedicated, regular daily practice, and she knows that I do it. And I have offered to her that she can join me anytime, and I will do additional mindfulness exercises or even formal meditation with her whenever she's ready for it. And I don't think she's averse to it. I think she just is she was a preteen, and now she's a teen, and she's doing her own thing. And I'm happy to let her do that. The one thing that I would say that has followed through is that we do go to Magnolia Grove, which is a meditation center based out of the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition in Batesville, Mississippi, which is about 3 hours from here. She loves to go there and spend a day or a weekend of mindfulness. And we were actually slotted to do that the weekend of spring break, but of course everything got canceled and things got closed down, and we were going to go there on our way to Arkansas to see my father. And so, she loves going there. She loves the study and the practice. She loves eating silently, it's mindfully and silently. So she really likes it. And I have no doubt that at some point in her life, when she decides she's ready, she will come back to a formal practice. And, but I'm not worried about it. She's a thoughtful child, and she's gotten a little bit of it, and she knows she's got a taste, and she likes it. And so, I think that's the story in a nutshell, as far as I can remember, John.
There are two things that I really like about the story, Rob, and one of them is that the way you just gave her space that she grew into meditating for longer, starting with just 1 minute. And by the time y'all were not meditating anymore, how long was she going?
Probably 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay, so longer. But that's fine. Like, that's where she started, and now she'll also go for a weekend to the camp. The way that we need to, be compassionate with ourselves around this is to recognize that it's not easy, and we start where we start, but we don't finish there. And that, sort of dropping the practice and then having ourselves come back to the practice is part of the practice. Mm-hmm. So there's not a lot of negatives or penalties involved in doing this. It's something you're doing for your own wellness. All right. So
can I add to that just a little bit?
Absolutely.
So to further that point, I agree with that wholeheartedly. To further that point, my journey into meditation began when I got into the program of AA, and if we make it to May the 5th, I will have 30 years clean. So that's a substantial accomplishment that I've done day to day, one day at a time, as they say in AA. And, in the AA, one of the steps, the 11th step, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with higher power as we understand it. And I didn't know what meditation was, but I knew I wanted to try it because the program said that I should do it. And I was trying everything that I could to get sober. And so, sputtering, starting, trying this, trying that, not knowing what to do, and on my own. And this was in South Texas at that point, and there was nobody that I knew that had any formal instruction about meditation. So I just did my thing, and I just guessed. And that went on for years and decades, actually, of just trying this and that and quitting and giving it up for years at a time. And then eventually, cut to the chase, the story is that I just became interested enough in the formality and the actual practice, the systematic practice of meditation, that, as I was just talking Carolyn earlier, one of the steps was to come through the university's Bama Wellness. I don't know if that's what it was called at that particular time, but the meditation program that was offered through Dr. Harriet Meyer here at the university. And that got me a little bit more motivated and a little bit more momentum. But still, even to that point, there was just a week there, and then 3 or 4 months off, and then a week again. And it's really hard to develop any sort of momentum. The short of the story is that at some point I had enough momentum that I made a commitment to myself to do 20 minutes a day. But again, we're talking, I have a daily practice for over 4 years now. So we're talking almost 26 years of stopping and starting and getting benefit from all that all along the way. That was also very helpful to me. So everybody's journey, just to reinforce what Josh was saying earlier, everybody's story is going to be completely different. You got to take it however you can get it. If it's valuable to you at all, then do it. I think the key for my description of how art works in our lives most effectively is curiosity. And that's what I teach to my students, is that curiosity is really a judgment-free zone if you're actually curious and you're not condemnational with your curiosity. If you're just looking at things for what they are to see what you can find, you can really develop a nice practice and a really artful way of looking at life. And it's freeing and very opening. So hopefully that was helpful, supplemental.
Yeah, it is. And, I actually didn't say that I also meditate, but it is not a daily practice. I'm in that 26-year period that Rob was talking about, where it comes and goes. And I think that that's an important thing to acknowledge, because that's the same way it is with all of our health behaviors. If we choose to eat healthy because every single meal we make healthier choices, we choose physical activity because every single time we do something good for our, some physical activity for exercise. Every single time, that's a choice that we're making, and those choices add up over time to bring us the benefits. But every single time we have to make that choice, and every single time we do is a win. So I think that's a really important piece of that, to sort of get that mindset that we have healthier lives by making healthier choices all day, every day. All right. So Rob, tell us about your approach.
Yeah, my approach is, you mean my own personal practice to this right now, or
what you sent me?
Oh, okay. So yeah, I see it right there on the slide. I'm trying to look at you because I just this format is really difficult for me. I love to have conversations, so as you know, so it's hard for me to present myself as an expert. I suppose if I'm an expert at anything, it's in me. So I'll tell you my approach to the mindfulness, and it is consistency, and it is consistency at the digestible level that you're capable of. And I think what I try to accomplish more than anything, and I think, well, there's a lot here. What I try to accomplish is really being. It's what Dan Harris was describing as being in the now. I don't know what language sits well for you. It doesn't really matter, but reality is reality. And a lot of times we tell ourselves, go throughout the day in this story that is going on in our minds that we're not really even aware that that's happening. But the stories that we tell ourselves are having to do with the past or having to do with the future, but they're rarely about right now. And so the practice really is engaging in the present moment, and that is changing moment to moment. So we have to, if we're going to be in the moment, we have to have some sort of an anchor. We have to have some sort of something to keep us there. And there, a multitude of things. There's all sorts of sensations you can engage in and focus on, and those help. But I think the easiest thing for me to do is to focus on either body sensations or sound. If you want to try sound, or do you want to continue to talk about it a little bit more before we talk about?
Yeah, just go ahead through your approach, and then we'll refer back to it.
Okay, good. So it's being in the now, and then the present moment to moment, and then being aware of what's going on in the moment, which takes a lot of courage in some regards. Being kind to ourselves. So one of the things I was saying to Josh yesterday that I've learned in working with my students and working with myself and studying is that one of the things we tend to do is get really down on ourselves when we're sitting and trying to focus on any particular sensation or whatever our anchor is. We lose focus and we go off into the story. And then when we realize we're off in the story, we're lost in thought. Then when we realize that, we tend to come back or we're down on ourselves for having gone off. But that's a very natural thing for the brain to do. Your brain is supposed to do that, and it does it naturally on its own. There's nothing to feel guilty about. So with the students, what I tell them is, when you realize that you were lost in thought, that's actually a moment of celebration. That's actually a moment of being present in the now. So that particular thing right there, if you can learn to be kind to yourself and go, oh, I'm back, like that's a celebration right there. And I it's a little pat on the back. Oh, I'm great. I'm here now, instead of the opposite, is very helpful. And then the last part about that is that children do not have any sense that they don't have any guilt about being lost in the moment or being in the moment or what they're supposed to be doing. They just do what they do because they feel safe. If they're in a safe environment, they do what they do, and they can get lost in the moment, but they're not actually lost in the moment. They're right there with the moment. They're doing the thing that they're doing. If you've ever seen a child, they say you can watch children play and it's serious play because they're right in the moment. They are like, if a stick is a sword, it is a sword, and they're there with it, with every ounce of their being. And they feel no guilt about that. They don't think about what they're supposed to be doing or what they're going to have for dinner or what happened earlier because their parent maybe got mad at them or irritated. It's just the sword is the sword, and they're there, and it didn't have anything to do with any sense of responsibility. And so I like to teach my students, and I like to think of myself and teach my daughter as well, to be childlike, not childish, because we do have to grow up. Somebody has to take care of the world. Somebody has to take care of setting any sort of economic status in motion for getting us out of this COVID-19. There has to be a lot of organization. There has to be a lot of responsibility taken. But to engage that childlike nature of ourselves really gives us a freedom to participate without guilt or without any sense that there's too much seriousness. In Buddhist circles, they talk about it as right effort rather than over effort, or wrong effort. And the right effort is just the right amount. It's the right amount to get you there, but not too much so that you feel like you're not getting enough from it. And that's a negotiation as well that happens in the moment too, which we can talk more about.
Yeah, and I added a little gold star to this. I think that Rob's idea that in the process of mindfulness, as you're bringing your thoughts back to the present moment, that every time you become aware that you did that is a win, is a moment to celebrate. I think that is so powerful, and I hadn't heard it like that before, because the process of mindfulness can feel like work, but it's not. It's about building in these healthy pieces to you. And that just changes everything so powerfully, because rather than being about the moments where you've lost focus on the present, it puts the focus really on the moments where you bring it back.
Yeah, if I can add to that just a little bit, the cool thing about noticing your thoughts is that, and if you get a little momentum in to notice that the thoughts come without you having any.
Looks like we might be losing him. Is he back?
I think so.
Is it me?
It's you.
Yeah. Okay. We have 3 people using. Uh-oh. I see my internet connection is unstable. We have 3 people using the internet right now for Zooming and FaceTiming work and stuff. So am I back?
You're back.
Where did I leave off?
I have about 20 seconds in my head, and I think we exhausted those.
Yeah, okay. But if you have me, I'll just back up, and hopefully we're not doubling up. But the thoughts coming, if you start to recognize them coming, you start to notice that you're not generating those thoughts. And oftentimes we think that we are thinking and that is some sort of willful activity. But what you wind up noticing is that your thoughts come without you expending any effort at all. And therefore, you're free from guilt of thinking about those thoughts. You can just think about them as thoughts. You're watching them, therefore they're not necessarily you, or you don't have as much responsibility for them as you would like to think that you do. So therefore you can let them go. You think this thing, it bothers you, you can recognize it, and then you just let it go. That's the other aspect of the practice that I teach my students and I practice myself, is that sitting every day is really a practice of letting go. It's a practice of letting go of the past and letting go of the future and renewing your faith in the present moment. And if you can get comfortable sitting there for any time at all, it's a really powerful moment to say, oh, this is the present. Great. And then that has a reflexive property in your life later on. That's what we talked about it. Josh and I talked about it yesterday as a side effect of the meditation practice, that it creeps into your life without you even noticing it. It's really beautiful, because if you get enough momentum and enough practice, consistent practice, you start to notice being mindful without having to exert any effort at all, which is like, talk about a feeling good about yourself when you recognize that you're with your child and you actually think, I'm thinking because I'm with my child. That is a really beautiful moment. Or to recognize that you're actually just there. It feels really good.
Yeah. And I remember when I first learned that, well, you know what? We only have 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop talking, Rob, and let you lead us in some activities. So
Okay.
what do you want to do first?
Let's do a listening activity. And a lot of times I use this activity as, he's got standing activity, but let's go with the listening, because
do what you want.
it serves a dual purpose. It serves the purpose of mindfulness, first of all, or awareness, really, to be more accurate. And it also serves the purpose of showing people what it's like to be a musician, to listen as a musician, because we're not really all that aware of how powerful our listening can be. So it serves 2 purposes. So I'll just guide you through it, and you can be somewhere where you're comfortable and you're not going to be disturbed. And I don't mean that it has to be completely quiet at all. As long as nobody's going to ask you to talk to them, that qualifies as not being disturbed. Yes. So all sorts of things can be happening around you, and you can maintain your sense of awareness and equanimity. That is the cool thing about the practice. So we'll do 60 seconds. You will hear a bell, and then I will guide you through the 60 seconds, and it'll be very simple and hopefully very effective. So here we go with the bell. So as you sit, you can feel your body in the chair or on the cushion. Just start to notice the pressure in the chair, your body against the chair in different places. you can try to sit as straight as possible, but not at all stiff. So just straight. And then once you get comfortable, you start to notice the sounds directly in front of you. Just bring your attention to the sound directly in front of you. The bell's about to go off. Okay, let's do that one more time. We'll do a 90 seconds this time. I didn't realize how short 60 seconds was going to be in this particular format. Great. One more time. We will pick up where we left off. Here comes the warm-up, and here's the bell, and we will pick up where we left off. Continue to notice the sound directly in front of you. You can both notice the sounds as they are conceptually, you can name them, or you can think of them non-conceptually as just sounds. You can say in your mind, hearing, hearing, hearing. You'll probably notice your attention shifting to something that's going on in the future, something that happened in the past. Perhaps you'll notice a sound to your left or behind you. Continue to refocus it to the front. Now, widen your view, as it were, to your left and to your right, so that you're hearing everything in front of you and everything to your left and everything to your right. Just do that for 10 seconds. Okay. It's really hard to do quickly. The funny thing is that we tend to rush through life thinking that, 90 seconds is got to get in 90 seconds. But when you start to sit and pay attention to what's going on around you, you actually notice that it feels different. It feels, I don't know, sometimes it feels quicker, sometimes it feels slower, sometimes you're wondering what's going on. But hopefully you notice the difference in the thinking about the sound in front of you and the thinking about the sound or the awareness of the sound on the sides of you. And then if we were to lengthen the practice, you would start to notice that those sounds oscillate and then your attention goes away and then you come back and you notice that as well. And if we chose to do that, we could spend a little bit more time doing that as well. But I know we want to leave time for questions, perhaps, or to do something.
Do you want to, Rob, do you want to go through what somebody would need to think about if they wanted to start meditating? What the process would be to start meditating?
Sure. It's so personal. I think the thing for me is to really establish a time that that you cannot be disturbed. Again, it doesn't have to be a quiet place. You just have to have no one interacting with you. As you get more skilled, because I definitely think that this is a skill. This is something that you can develop just like any sort of physical fitness is or physical skill. As you get more skilled, you can meditate and be mindful wherever you go. I teach that to my students all the time while they're sitting at the bus waiting for the bus to come get them for the next class. Just pay attention to what's going on around you, rather than your phone or a book or whatever. So that's the first thing, is to find some place where you're not going to be disturbed. And then the second thing is to just, I tend to use this app, which I can link to in the comments, the Insight Meditation app, which I really like. And they offer a free version. I've paid for it, a one-time pay, so it's not a subscription like the 10% Happier. But it has some really nice sounds in it. And I prefer the sounds of bells or something like that rather than an alarm. A lot of times people will set an alarm, and I just think when you think about the word alarm, is this what you want to be controlling your attention, is an alarm? So I've actually started to use the Insight Meditation app as my quote unquote alarm to wake me up in the morning. I just set it every night for a different length. So that's the two key factors. And then the other thing is to just sit for as long as you can sit and focus on whatever you can focus on. I mean, if you like to focus on the breath and the process of breathing, there are 3 different places that you can focus your attention while you're sitting. The first is the tip of the nose. So that is at the bottom of the nose, where the bottom of the nose meets the lip. It's a really sensitive spot to notice the air coming in and out. The second place is the chest. And the third place is the stomach, so the abdomen. And when you sit and you start to focus on your breathing, you will start to notice, and I'm not talking about actually affecting the breath. You're just noticing the natural breath. So you notice what it does on its own. And that in and of itself is a really, really powerful mindfulness activity or awareness activity, because it's portable and it's personal and it's also universal. So you can take your breath with you everywhere you go, and it will feel different in different situations. And that's a really handy and helpful tool. And then we all experience breath. So now we're talking about the interconnectedness. And if people talk about, during this COVID thing, about focusing on the things that we all share in common, which this is a big one. It's a pandemic. It's the first one that anybody that I know of has ever actually been through. So you also can think of the breath in that same way. That's a very powerful thing. If you want to focus on different sensations, it's really the same thing. It's, if you're going to focus on sound, let the sounds come and go. Let your attention come and go. Be kind to yourself when you come back. If you want to focus on body sensations, you can do that as well. You'll notice little itches, little scratches, little things like that. Those things are good to notice. And you can scratch them if you want to. I got some really bad instruction early on, maybe 10 years ago. They said, sit, and if you have an itch, don't itch it. Don't scratch it. And that's just torture. Because I didn't know why. I do now know why to not do that, but that seems like a forced activity, which I was not, because then of course you itch all over.
Right.
Then you don't want to do that. So and sit for whatever time period you possibly can.
Rob, that's great advice. And what I hope everybody got from like the things we talked about today is that there's not one way to do this. There's not one right way. Your way is the right way. And there are lots of ways to do it. So why don't you go ahead and ask some questions, and we'll spend a few minutes answering before we wrap this up. While I wait for questions, I'll mention that I misspoke earlier. Dan Harris and Russ Harris are different people. Russ Harris wrote The Happiness Trap and the Face COVID brochure, and Dan Harris wrote 10% Happier, and he was the person we saw in the interview earlier. Sorry for that mistake. You can see how it happened. So what questions do y'all have about meditation or mindfulness?
Yeah.
While I wait for some questions to come through, I'll mention that one of the things Rob said yesterday is that he likes to recommend 9 minutes a day for a month, just to get started and see how you like it. And I think that goes along well with the 1 minute or 2 minute start. If you can't get to 9 minutes, that's fine. Work up to 9 minutes.
I know that when I try to do this in the morning, sometimes when I get up, I'm just tired already. So it seems hard for me to think about sitting there quietly for 10 minutes when I get up and I might fall back asleep. So do you have any suggestions for, I mean, obviously you would do it at another time, but it seems like I hear a lot of times that the suggestion is to do it when you wake up in the morning.
Yeah, I think the reason that that's suggested is because your mind is fresh. It's not filled with daily activities, and you haven't developed this momentum of doing instead of being. So you're already in being mode. But if it doesn't work for you in the morning, then don't do it in the morning. I mean, really, literally, like you can do it before you go to sleep. You can have an app that has mindfulness activity to help you fall asleep, and then fall asleep guilt-free doing a meditation. You know, I mean, one of the things that happens on retreats is that people fall asleep. And nobody, you know, condemns them for it. It does happen. I do not have the tendency to fall asleep while I'm meditating, but a lot of people do. Again, I mean, to be guilt-free is the most beautiful thing in the world. What works for you works for you. And, you know, so, I mean, I just find a time at lunch. For me, it's really hard once I develop that momentum in my day to stop, even though I know I love it. Even to just walk in my office after 6 hours straight of classes, which I have on Wednesdays, is really hard. It's really hard to like push the brakes to do that. So
I do have my cup of coffee with me in the morning. I take a few sips of coffee and then I'll sit down when I do it in the morning and do it then. I more often accomplish doing 1 or 2 minutes of meditation throughout the day when I notice I'm feeling hectic or scattered or stressed. I'll just like calm down for 2 to 5 minutes, because that's a lot easier to do than to try to fit 15 or 20 minutes, which really does change you in your day. So if you know you have to keep going, that can be good for you or hard for you.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't see any questions come through. So, and we are about 1 minute out. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the meditation discussion. Thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you
So much of your experience with us.
you.
I will also mention that we've got another Let's Talk coming up next week, and that's going to be about technology and emotional expression and how we can communicate through technology. And then we have more webinars coming. How about that? In May, we're going to talk about sleeping through a crisis and coping as a family in close quarters. We're going to have more about exercise. I'm going to talk about coping with cabin fever. I'll see what there is out there. By May 19th, I bet there's a lot out there about coping with cabin fever. We're going to talk about some more fitness stuff. And then as we get towards the end of the May, bouncing back from quarantine. What are some things we can think about as we start to think about getting back to life some? Carolyn mentioned that she wants to share with everyone a new app from the National Center for PTSD called COVID Coach, designed to help build resilience, manage stress, and increase well-being during the crisis. And that's in the chat box. And also Holly shared earlier, again, Dan Harris's app, 10% Happier, which is, you get 3 months free if you're not in healthcare or a first responder, but you actually get 6 months free to the app if you're a healthcare or first responder. And Rob mentioned Insight Timer. We'll put these links up on the webinar page with the video. Thank you guys so much for joining us today for this conversation. And I'll see y'all next week.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you.